Hey guys, today we wade into the icy, unpredictable waters of the North Sea, a place that might look calm from a plane window, but has swallowed more lives than most battlefields. You're standing barefoot on a shoreline older than the concept of countries, breathing in salt-soaked air, staring at a horizon that once wasn't water at all. Picture this. Not so long ago, geologically speaking, you'd be surrounded by grassy plains, rivers curling through valleys, and herds of woolly mammoths trotting past your fishing line. But now, it's all gone. Underwater. Somewhere beneath those choppy waves lies a drowned world, one you definitely wouldn't want to scuba through without ancient monster insurance. Spoiler alert, you probably wouldn't survive this sea's mood swings. Not in a kayak, not in a trawler, not even in your overconfident cruise ship. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your city and local time in the comments. Let's see where and when you're watching from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into today's journey together. You kneel at the edge of a lost world, Doggerland. It sounds like a theme park for oversized golden retrievers, but it was actually a sprawling stretch of land connecting Britain to mainland Europe. Around 10,000 years ago, it was lush, green, and full of life. Think open meadows, oak forests, and wild coffee. Damn, not waves crashing over silt and forgotten bones. You take a slow breath. Somewhere out there, under your nose, are the remains of ancient campsites, flint tools, and the DNA of people who once called this place home. And then comes the melt. The last ice age starts to pack its bags, and the glaciers holding back all that water begin to weep. Sea levels rise, slowly at first, then like a busted faucet, and Doggerland sinks like a stone with secrets. One theory even says a catastrophic tsunami about 8,200 years ago delivered the final punch. Historians still argue whether it was a one-time disaster or a slow, soggy goodbye. But you can almost feel it, the sudden panic of people scrambling for higher ground, watching their home dissolve under tidal chaos. No dramatic orchestra, no Instagram farewell. Just cold, wet silence. You shuffle forward along the timeline and land in the Bronze Age. North Sea communities evolve. Trade routes form. Ships are carved with bronze tools. But this sea, it never plays fair. Currents change overnight. Fog wraps around you like a wet curtain. Even early navigators speak of eerie forces, ghost lights bobbing over the water, compass needles spinning like they had too much mead. A cranky side note? Some coastal tribes buried their dead with paddles, just in case they needed to row their way into the afterlife. Can't make that up. And then there's the Saxon era. You can feel the chill, can't you? Salt air cutting through your wool cloak, waves hissing like gossip. Viking longships begin slicing through these waters, their carved dragon heads grinning as they raid coastal villages. For a moment, you're on one of those ships, your boots slick with seawater, your stomach twisting with the pitch and roll. The North Sea is no ally. It's a moody monster, often turning on its own. Entire fleets vanish. And unlike in Hollywood, nobody finds a message in a bottle. Just splintered wood and maybe a washed-up sandal. But it wasn't just war and weather. Sometimes the sea just rearranged the map. Take the Goodwin Sands, a shifting sandbank off England's southeastern coast. It's basically a booby trap for boats. One day solid ground, the next day soup. Legend has it, a greedy noble ignored engineers' warnings and tried to dam the coastline, resulting in the flooding of his entire estate, which now lies buried under silt and sea foam. Historians can't quite agree if it's poetic justice or historical exaggeration. But either way, don't trust the shoreline. You pass wind-worn fishermen who swear the sea whispers to them at night. Some say they've seen ruins beneath the waves, stone circles, paved roads, even skeletal forests. Scientists have confirmed submerged tree stumps in peat beds, so maybe those stories aren't as salty as they sound. You crouch at the edge of an exposed tidal flat, fingertips brushing over ancient roots still clinging to the mud. For a moment, you imagine living here, fishing under moonlight, cooking over driftwood fires, always keeping one ear open for that distant rumble of change. And then, just when you think you've soaked in enough prehistoric melancholy, something gleams in the sand. A hand axe, smoothed by time. Your fingers tighten around it. You're holding the memory of a person who likely never saw the sea rise. They probably didn't even believe it could. But here we are. The irony? Constantly, we see the frosty streams of nan-fired kings out of the sea. What we have. Marine archaeologists drop sonar into the deep and pull up stories from mud. In 2019, researchers found DNA from ancient plants and even woolly rhinos buried beneath the seafloor. A few years before that, a trawler accidentally hauled up a Neanderthal skull fragment. Like, oops, there's your Ice Age cousin, chilling in the mitt. This sea keeps no secrets. Or rather, it keeps all of them, until it suddenly spits one back like a drunk uncle at a family reunion. As the light fades, you realize the North Sea didn't just drown a continent, it carved new ones. It created Britain as an island. It split families, languages, migrations. It took what was whole and made it separate. Still does, in some ways. And here you are, on the shifting edge, toes in water that once lapped at ancient feet. It's not just history beneath you. It's a memory, retold by the tide. You don't even have to wait long before the North Sea reminds you who's boss. Imagine standing on a deck, the cold wind biting through your jacket like it's personal, while salty spray lashes your face. The sky dims to slate, and waves rise like the fists of an angry giant. Welcome to the realm where ships come to die, or at least to have a very bad day. This is where your journey shifts from lost lands to wrecked vessels, sunken stories, and legends thick enough to fog a sailor's mind. You hear the creak of timbers, the slap of waves against hulls, and maybe a faint chant of old sea shanties carried on the wind. In these waters, ships don't just sink, they vanish. Over the centuries, the North Sea has claimed thousands of vessels, each with its own tale of hubris, fate, or just really, really bad weather. Picture the infamous Mary Rose, Henry VIII's pride and joy, which sank in the Solent not far off the North Sea, or the Great Storm of 1703 that wrecked countless ships along these treacherous coasts. Historians still argue whether that storm was the worst natural maritime disaster in British history, but the wreckage it left behind, absolutely indisputable. You lean on the rail and watch a fishing boat bob like a cork, the crew bracing for the next swell. You can almost hear them swapping stories about whirlpools that suddenly appear, dragging unlucky sailors into watery graves. Here's a quirky tidbit. Sailors once believed in the maelstrom, a monstrous whirlpool said to lurk off the Norwegian coast. It's part legend, part very real phenomenon, where currents collide so fiercely that ships get pulled under. Edgar Allan Poe even wrote a short story inspired by it. That's right, the North Sea gave birth to some of the creepiest maritime lore ever. your mind drifts to the many naval battles fought on these cold waves. The Battle of Jutland in 1916 was the largest naval battle of World War I, a brutal clash between the British Royal Navy and the German Imperial Navy. You can almost hear the thunder of cannons and the groan of steel as massive dreadnoughts rumbled through fog and gunpowder smoke. Thousands died, many at sea, swallowed by waves or trapped in sinking ships. The sea didn't discriminate. It welcomed all with a cold, indifferent embrace. Historians still argue whether Jutland was a tactical victory for the British or a strategic win for the Germans. Either way, it cemented the North Sea's reputation as a battleground and graveyard. But the sea's dangers aren't always from enemy fire or natural fury. There's a strange side to these waters. Ghost ships that appear without crews, ships found adrift with no one aboard, as if the sea itself decided the passengers had overstayed their welcome. In 1902, the Mary Celeste became one of the most famous mysteries of the time, discovered drifting in the Atlantic with no one on board. Though not in the North Sea, sailors here whisper of similar tales. Could it be pirates, sea monsters, or just good old-fashioned maritime misfortune? Whatever the truth, it adds to the sea's eerie reputation. You think about the Goodwin Sands again, which we met back in Section 1, because, yes, this shifting graveyard of ships is as deadly now as it was centuries ago. Over 2,000 shipwrecks lie hidden beneath those deceptive waves. You imagine a vessel sliding onto the sands, its hull groaning as it breaks apart in the surf. Sometimes entire fleets have been trapped here during storms, the sands acting like quicksand for ships. If you ever find yourself near there, consider this a polite warning. Don't trust the seafloor. It's like walking on a trampoline made of glass. And it's not just nature playing tricks. The North Sea was also a playground for warships, pirates, and smugglers. Vikings raided coastal towns from the 8th century onwards, their longships gliding silently through fog, like shadows come to life. You can almost hear their battle cries and the clash of swords echoing across the water. Later, during both World Wars, the North Sea became a maze of mines, patrol boats, and submarine skirmishes. These invisible killers still lurk beneath the waves, waiting decades later to catch a careless diver or trawler. There's a local saying, better to fear the Dead Sea than the living fish. Speaking of danger, ever heard of the Devil's Hole? It's a deep trench in the North Sea known for sudden, violent upwellings of water. Fishermen swear by it, claiming it can swallow nets, boats, and sometimes even luck itself. It's one of those quirks that make you think the sea has a sense of humor or a vendetta. Modern sailors respect it but keep their distance, because you never really know what the North Sea will throw at you next. So as you imagine these restless waters, full of lost ships and whispered curses, you start to understand why the North Sea earned the nickname Widowmaker. It's a place where man's best efforts often fall short, where technology sometimes feels like a laughable defense against raw nature. It reminded of a quirky fact. Sailors in the Middle Ages would sometimes wear talismans made of whale bones or carry sea charms to ward off storms. Not exactly foolproof, but hey, a little superstition goes a long way when you're flirting with disaster. Now, you settle in for a mental stroll through history's most infamous storms. The night of October 14, 1871, is particularly chilling. A storm so fierce it sank over 50 ships along the Dutch and German coasts. Entire fishing communities lost their livelihoods overnight. You picture a small village, the sea stealing everything. Boats, nets, even the children's laughter. It's hard to imagine the pain, but the North Sea has long been a harsh teacher. And though we've built lighthouses, radar, and GPS, the sea still calls the shots. You glance again at the horizon, where the sun tries to pierce the thick cloud cover. This is a sea that humbles you. You're just a speck in a watery expanse that remembers every lost ship, every scream carried off by the wind, every hand that slipped beneath the waves. And yet, people keep coming back. To fish, to trade, to explore. Because the North Sea isn't just a killer, it's a life source, a connector, a challenge to be respected. You take a deep breath, taste the salt and cold air, and feel that strange mixture of fear and awe. The North Sea's story isn't finished yet. It's still writing itself, one wave at a time. You surface now, blinking against the harsh light of a new era, the age of oil rigs, pipelines, and modern menace. The North Sea, once a graveyard for wooden ships and steel warships, has transformed into a buzzing hive of industrial activity. If you thought the sea's deadliest threats were storms and sinking ships, think again. Today, you're wading into a complex web of environmental hazards, ghost nets, and climate alarms that hum louder than any oil rig engine. You step onto the platform of a towering oil rig, the metal skeleton creaking beneath your boots. It feels less like a ship and more like a small man-made island, precariously perched over the restless water. Since the 1960s, the North Sea has been a treasure trove of oil and gas. Those first rigs were engineering marvels, pushing human ingenuity to its limits. The oil boom transformed economies and energy politics overnight. But with every barrel pumped, the sea's delicate balance shifted. You probably didn't realize that the North Sea supplies about 10% of Europe's oil. So it's not just water out here, it's black gold, seeping from ancient seabeds. Yet, beneath the steel and grit lies a troubling story. Ghost nets, abandoned, fishing gear, drifting like underwater plastic forests, trap marine life, and ruin ecosystems. Some estimates suggest thousands of tons of these nets float beneath the surface, silently ensnaring fish, seals, and even seabirds. It's a modern tragedy with roots in the past. Back when fishermen's nets were handmade and biodegradable, lost gear was just a minor inconvenience. Now, it's a deadly trap that can take decades to degrade. You can almost hear a seal's muffled cries tangled in one of these nylon nightmares. Not exactly the sea's version of a welcome mat. The North Sea's oil rigs are also hotspots for accidents and leaks. You imagine the horror of a spill in such a vulnerable environment. The 1990s saw several incidents that raised alarms, and though safety has improved, the risk remains. Historians still argue whether the economic benefits of offshore drilling outweigh the environmental costs. You don't have to pick a side to know it's a tough question. The sea is both a resource and a victim. And just when you think things couldn't get more complicated, climate change barrels in like a storm. Rising temperatures, changing currents, and more frequent storms aren't just bad news for the rigs, they threaten entire coastal communities. Erosion eats away at beaches once considered safe, while shifting fish populations throw traditional fishing patterns into chaos. Scientists debate how exactly the North Sea ecosystem will respond, but one thing's the old rhythms are in the rigs. Jacob, breaking down. But it's not all doom and gloom. Efforts to protect the sea are growing. Marine reserves have been established, and cleanup projects target ghost nets and pollution. You smile at a quirky fact. Some engineers have started developing underwater robots that mimic fish to patrol and clean these nets. Maybe the sea's next defenders won't be humans at all, but robotic fish soldiers. Take that, ghost nets. You look out over the horizon, where an offshore wind farm spins silently against the sunset. These turbines represent a hopeful pivot away from fossil fuels, harnessing the sea's relentless wind instead of its buried treasures. It's a quieter threat to the sea's health, but one that could help tip the scales back toward balance. The North Sea's story is far from over. It's a narrative of lost worlds, deadly storms, and industrial might, but also one of resilience and adaptation. You can almost hear the sea whispering, warning us to respect its power and mystery. And as you stand there, on the edge of past and future, you realize this isn't just about water and waves. It's about humanity's tangled relationship with nature, a lesson written in salt and time. You take a deep breath, feeling the cool wind on your face. The North Sea, for all its dangers, still calls to you, a restless living force beneath your feet and beyond the horizon.